Well, that was not fun on Saturday as the Chicago Fire's playoff run came to a screeching halt in a game against the Philadelphia Union. That was really, really bad in all sorts of ways. We'll count those ways, we'll try to find some silver linings, and we'll look ahead to an offseason that's already getting going today on CHGO Fire. Hello and welcome to CHGO Fire. I'm Alex Campbell. Thanks so much for joining us live on YouTube or listening wherever you get your podcasts. And today to talk about Philadelphia Union knocking the Chicago Fire out of the MLS Cup playoffs, I am joined by a man who also had a front row seat to this game on Saturday, but who, like me, was probably glad that he wasn't on the call for it, having to try to figure out anything to say about the final hour of this game because it was bad already and basically nothing interesting happened on the field after that, as we will get to. You might have heard him this season on Fire radio broadcasts. However, Max Anderson, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you having me here, Alex. And yeah, it was a tough watch. Not being on the broadcast was a different perspective, certainly, but was still a good front row seat there at SeatGeek, which was a great environment. I mean, the place was buzzing before we got started, but yeah. We'll get into why that evaporated pretty quickly, right?
Yeah, it did indeed. I mean, let's talk let's reflect big picture before we get into the nitty gritty. We've had 48 hours almost now to sit with this. How are you feeling? Because again, the feelings leaving the stadium on Saturday night were all bad. But with a little bit of a hindsight as the offseason has now officially started, what's stuck with you from Saturday night?
So this is the third season that I've been working with the radio crew, and the first two seasons were wild, right? Started with Ezra Hendrickson. He was removed halfway through my first season. Frank Klopas takes over in the interim, ends up getting the full job for a full season, and then they make the change, and obviously Greg's here now. So I've really been reflecting on the last 3 years as a whole, and thinking back where we were 2 years ago at this time has been really wild and in a good way to see the progress that's been made. And
right.
A lot got wrapped up in the night of what happened in that finale. But I marvel at the improvement this season, the 20 plus point improvement. And it wasn't just the points. You think about some games this season where people were starting to come back with the same old fire on some of the late game collapses. So it could have been even more, especially early in the year with some of the mistakes that were happening on a pretty consistent basis. But you think about it in a whole, it's really remarkable where this team got in a season. The moves that were made were really shrewd ones that got this team better quickly. I don't think anybody could have predicted how good Philip Zinkernagel would be. If you put anybody to a lie detector test anywhere in the American soccer ecosystem, there's no way. And he was a revelation. And so thinking about it as a whole, I think less about Saturday night and what happened in those two games and more about where this team is now and given the resources that I think are available and what are going to happen moving forward. Really excited about the future of this franchise.
Yeah, absolutely. And you think about, you talk about, where they are now versus where they were 2 years ago. I mean, are there moves on the roster that need to be made? Sure, but there's nobody on this roster right now who fans are clamoring for, oh my God, he's terrible. That contract is so bad. Buy him out now. Get him out of here. There's none of that. And again, that's a testament to the business Greg Berhalter did this year. Not every signing was a smashing success. Romani Kouame has come and has likely gone already. And so, it's never going to be an 100% hit rate. But no, I mean, real tangible progress was made this year. And it's crazy, you can nitpick any game you want, but it is crazy to think that if, for example, if the only thing you change is that late Jacob Morrell bicycle kick goal in the DC United game. If that ball doesn't go in the back of the net and everything else plays out the same, the Fire are the 7 seed, and it's the Columbus Crew who end up having to deal with Philadelphia. Not that I'm saying going up against FC Cincinnati's attack would have gone any better for the Fire, but again, this is a game of such fine margins, and given how ridiculously good the Eastern Conference was this year, yeah, I think it's, you might say, oh, they barely made the playoffs, they finished 8th. It's like, yeah, but going from where they were to where they are right now and in a position where they have a platform to climb higher next season, I don't think anybody would dispute that, depending on how the offseason goes. Yeah, I think, again, the further we get away from Saturday night, the better everybody's going to feel about this. Unfortunately, in our line of work, we do have to talk about what happened on Saturday night, and that is Chicago Fire 0, Philadelphia Union 3. Oof. There was optimism heading into this game, Max. They were back at home, although home was SeatGeek Stadium because they had been kicked out for a rugby match at Soldier Field. 2028 cannot come soon enough for a number of reasons. The Fire were so close in game 1, so there were still some good vibes out of that. And then the injury report showed up on Friday, which oddly did not list Philip Zinkernagel at all, despite the fact that, as far as we know, he might not have practiced all week. But on it was Chris Brady listed as questionable. That casts some real confusion onto things. And then we get to Saturday. We have heard no updates on Brady's condition. We still don't know exactly what the injury was, and he's not in the team. And it felt like, I had this conversation with a couple people pregame. There was already that conversation and kind of that shudder that's like, man, I hope this game isn't down to a goalkeeping mistake, because then the line's just going to be, oh, if Brady were here, it would have been different. And I'm not sure we can quite go that far, but, again, it's fair to say that any concerns by Chris Brady's absence turned out to be pretty warranted.
Yeah, it was unfortunate. I mean, that's the word that comes to mind as I watched it. You felt for Jeff Gall, he's not trying to do what happened. And I think that's the hardest part, as, trying to put myself in the shoes of a fan. That's the hardest part, is you invest so much, and then for it to go like that, I think we saw some frustration from the fans early. I don't think there's any question that then the second mistake happens. And again, I know you're going to go through that and kind of detail it. You fell for him because he's not a bad guy, and he works so hard, and he's really well thought of. I know, Alex, you're closer to a lot of it than me, but well thought of as a person, as a player. Mm-hmm. And so you really felt in that big stage, that big situation, you felt for him, and you had to have that empathy, especially as a broadcaster. And I had it as a fan too. I was as frustrated as anybody else with how that game was going. And you understand those mixed emotions. You wish they wouldn't happen. Still a lot of time left, right? Even once it was 3-0, we've seen comebacks. This team was scored 66 goals in the regular season, was not out of the realm of possibility. And you just felt that the people in the stadium were struggling getting behind. There's people that were trying. You saw the moments when there was a little bit of positive play and fans were pumping up. Philip Zinkernagel at one point was pumping things up, trying to get people back excited. It was just a really tall hill to climb, and it was just a tough moment.
Yeah, I was going to talk about this later, but it was unfortunate to see that in the second half, when, again, not much was going on, the fans booing Gall with every touch. Again, I'm not here to tell anybody how to fan, but it was just, it's tough because, again, it's as in that moment, it's your club, it's your team who's being knocked out of the playoffs, and you feel like you got to blame somebody. And it's, but to your point, again, the game, it didn't feel over like really mathematically so until a little bit later. And it's sad that situation turned so sour, but you get it. Again, the mistakes were bad. We're going to detail the degree of bad they were. And it's just, it was just kind of a messy mixture of things going on emotionally, I think, in SeatGeek Stadium on Saturday. And it starts really, really early. The first thing I noticed, honestly, in this game, Max, was how hard Philly were pressing. I mean, they're a high-pressing team anyway, but clearly they had seen that the Fire were going to come out and going to try to have the ball, and Philly's response to that was basically, okay, good luck with that. And they came out to press really, really hard. I don't think we really ever found out what the Fire wanted to do in this game. We didn't really get a chance to see it because 8th minute, Philly scores. I saw some criticism of this ball that gets passed back by Romy Kouame that ends up with Jeff Gall after Joel Waterman leaps over it. But We've got a picture we're going to show to the fans watching on YouTube, to the live audience, to kind of give a sense of what was going on here, because Jeff Gall absolutely sees Ty Baribo coming. He again has to look at him as he's receiving this pass. Jack Elliott is wide open to his left, and the nearest Philly player is running away from Jack Elliott. He's got plenty of space if he ends up on this ball. Gall's got time for 2 touches. He's got a time to take this first touch, even though it's a bad one, and then, do something with it. Instead, he takes kind of a bad touch. He looks upfield, looking downfield for somewhere to go with this ball, and the next thing you know, Ty Baribo has taken it off his foot. It's in the back of the net, and the nightmare scenario everybody is playing out in their heads when they see Chris Brady is out of the team. We get it 8 minutes into this game, and now it's kind of panic mode.
Yeah, it was tough. It was tough to watch, tough to see. As excited as everybody was, you just felt the air start to seep out of the balloon in a quick way. And I think to your point, the blame conversation is going to happen. I think one of the things that occurred to me in that situation were the 3 parties involved as well. I mean, Jeff Gall will be the first guy to stand up and say he made a mistake. There's no question about that. But you had Kwame, who has been in and out of the lineup. You had Waterman, who's been here for 2 months. And you've had Jeff Gall, who hasn't played a meaningful soccer game in 3 months. You had 3 pieces to that equation that haven't worked very much with each other. Mm-hmm. And you saw some of that as well. Now, again, I think you nailed it. I don't think anybody in the situation is going to try to diffuse blame. But it was inherent before the game even started that there were going to be pieces working together in a very tricky way on the back end with the way Philly plays that were going to be problematic. And I think from that standpoint, Jeff Gall was in a really tough position in that game with a defense that was different, with a midfielder that was different, and it all just worked together to have a really unfortunate moment that I think is going to be a tough one for him that he owned and stood up to and didn't deflect, and that might expect nothing less from Gall. And hopefully everybody can move on past this and he can continue to have a solid professional career, which I think he will. Fire signed him to an extension, so he's not going anywhere. And everyone can move on from what was just a really unfortunate moment.
Right. You talk about kind of a combination of errors. The second goal is very much that. 16th minute, 2-0 Philly. It's a long throw-in that the Fire do initially head away, and then Zinkernagel goes to clear it. He whiffs. Zinkernagel and Kuipers don't do a good job of closing down Kai Wagner, who plays the cross in. Elliott loses his mark on Ty Baribo. This is the kind of the thing about Jack Elliott that's a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde. He's amazing at attacking set pieces, but he can once in a while lose where he's at in space defensively. And then Jeff Gall probably has time here to come out and punch this ball away, and instead he backs up onto his goal line. The result of all those things is it's just a wide open header into the back of the net for Ty Baribo, and it's 2-0. And the fear now is you have moved on from the first goal being like, oh man, that sucked, to, oh, I hope this doesn't get ugly. Like, regardless of whose fault it is, now you've moved from goalkeeper howler to, oh boy, did these guys just not get off the bus today?
Yeah. One of the things that, I've coached various levels of American football, not soccer, as well as baseball, in addition to the broadcasting work I've been doing for years. And one of the things you talk about as a coach a lot is don't let one mistake create a second, compound on a second, compound on a third. And you got that feeling at times that as a team, they weren't able to move past some of the mistakes, which one of the things that was, I think, a hallmark of this team all season was how resilient they were, how the never can die attitude. I mean, game 1, perfect example of it, right? I mean, I don't know what the live odds were when it was 2-0 in the 83rd minute of that game. They had to have been astronomical to even get a draw, let alone to come back and win that game. So there really had been a hallmark of that team. So, I think at times, like you mentioned, the mistakes started to compound and the snowball started to happen a little bit, and they couldn't get out of their way. In that moment specifically, you mentioned the physical mistake where Zinkernagel's not able to actually get much of any contact on the clearance attempt, kind of sets up Wagner outside. Baribo's done that header towards the near post how many times in his life and career, and it's well executed on their part, so you tip your cap there. But to your point, you felt some of the confidence in the defensive core start to go, and I think that's not an insignificant part of the equation too.
Right. No, absolutely. Again, you got to credit Philly there. They won the Supporter Shield this season for a reason. And there's also the question of, hey, if Philip Zinkernagel's obliques are all working properly, is he able to get his foot a couple inches higher into the air and kick that ball away? Because again, Zinkernagel went the full 90 in this game, which is absurd. We talked to him after the match. He was clearly in some pain. It basically said they did everything they could this week to try to treat it and make it as unpainful as it could be, but it seemed like he did not have a very good time out there physically, in addition to how the game went. 10 minutes later, we had a very weird sub as Mauricio Pineda comes in for Romy Kouame. I don't understand this sub when you are losing, given that Pineda is a more defensive option than Kouame is for sure. Kouame hadn't been that bad. He didn't look hurt. That was probably his exit as a Fire player. I mean, I don't know how much it would have changed the game, Max, if they bring in just anybody else or leave Kouame out there at this point. But this was just a head scratcher and kind of felt like, a moment where I was thinking to myself, does anybody really know what they're doing here? What is the plan?
Yeah, I think from a tactical standpoint, you understood why Kouame, at least I partially understood why Kouame got the start.
Right.
Why that sub was made in the 25th minute, I think certainly a spark type of move, I guess, would be the equation. Pineda's done nice things in the midfield. I think at that point, they wanted to try to support the middle of the field after some of the mistakes that had happened.
Mm-hmm.
And Mauricio Pineda's a good candidate for that. That's the thought process, I think, if I had to piece it together. I don't know if I'd do it differently. I've seen the conversation around it should have been Kellen Acosta in that situation. Totally understand that critique. I don't know that, to your point, it was a substantial difference in terms of Pineda or Costa or who you would have brought in there. Frankly, I think it's a point that isn't that relevant to the overall conversation, if I had to be told.
Right. It's notable because of the timing of the sub. It's like it didn't, because it didn't come right after a goal. It's not like the second goal goes in and Berhalter's like, screw it, I'm gonna do this. And also I think the argument for it would be it gives Jay Davila a little more freedom to press up the pitch. It gives you probably more of a 4-2-3-1 than a 4-3-3, so it does provide that extra solidity in the middle. Pineda's a guy who's going to be better at dealing with crosses into the box and set pieces than Kouame is. So it was just the timing. It was just odd. Not long after this, though, the Fire get a lifeline, and that's in the 29th minute. There's a penalty awarded to the Fire as Lukic tackles Elliott on a corner. Then a scuffle ensues around the penalty spot as first Danley Jean-Jacques and then Ty Baribo both try to rough up the penalty spot, and the Fire catch on to this very quickly. Jean-Jacques throws a push into a Fire player, and I couldn't track down who it was because there's no replay on the live broadcast feed. They were in a replay of the penalty being called when the push happens, and then the broadcast nor the highlights ever go back to it, where Fire player ends up on the deck after a really strong two-handed shove from Jean-Jacques. I mean, there was, Fire players asking the question. VAR took a look at it. Just a yellow card in the end. Eventually, things cool down. Brian Gutierrez, who's one of the Fire's two penalty takers, along with Hugo Kuipers, steps up, and it's just a bad penalty. It's down to Blake's left. It's on the ground. It's not hard enough. It's not near the post. And this just was a when it rains it pours moment, and just kind of made it feel like, okay, this was just never going to be the Fire's day, and sometimes sports are like that.
You asked how have I been processing this over the last 48 hours. That's how you started the show, and I think 24 hours out, my first thinking was, what conversation are we having if at 2-0 is now 2-1 after that PK? I think that was my 24 hours afterthought of what are we talking about right now? Even if the Fire don't win, what are we having a conversation about on this show? And then I got to today, and I got a little bit more reflective and big picture. But you think about how that game one went, and once the iron of Philly was cracked a little bit, you saw them start to crumble just a little bit, right? Start to lose a little bit of composure, start to panic a little bit. So I think at 2-0, they felt like they had the game really well in hand. And had they been able to get back to 2-1, full strength, it would have been a fascinating soccer game. And
Yeah.
I lament the fact that we didn't get a chance to watch what that soccer game would have looked like. Penalties, I call them a coin flip. That's unfair because they're usually not 50-50. They're usually a lot better than that. But at the end of the day, you lost a couple of coin flips, and that can be really tough to swallow as a fan, and certainly as a broadcaster as you watch this. But you just wonder what it could have been like had that gone differently. That's what was my biggest takeaway.
Right, because then you wonder, and because the cascade continues immediately after this. You wonder
Right.
if Guti scores here, does everybody from Ugo Kuipers to Jeff Gall just take a big deep breath and say, okay, This opening half hour has sucked. It wasn't good, but we're not out of this. Let's start over. We've got an hour left of this game to figure it out. Instead, 3 minutes later, it's 3-0, and it's a second Jeff Gall mistake as the Fire are looking to play out from the back. Jack Elliott plays the ball back to Gall, and rather than getting his foot on it, Gall just lets this ball roll and roll and roll as he tries to line up a pass to somewhere. He's got Jonathan Dean available short if he doesn't want to go long. He waits way too long to make a decision. Milan Alowski's on top of him before he knows it. The clearance hits Alowski, and then just in almost a Looney Tunes fashion, loops to the top of the penalty area where Bruno Damiani meets it on the volley and hammers it into the open net. It's a ridiculous goal. It's a great strike by Damiani. You could not recreate this goal if you tried. And now you just got to kind of just throw your hands up and be like, well, it's been fun because, I mean, this is not as bad of a goalkeeper mistake as the first one is, given the weird circumstances of how this ball ends up in the back of the net. But, yeah, it goes back to what we were just talking about. It felt like the confidence wasn't there. Everybody's taking an extra beat. Everybody's second-guessing. And that's only going to be more true of your backup goalkeeper who's already kind of on, probably feeling really nervy given the way the game had gone to this moment for so far. And now at 3-0, it feels over.
Yeah, I mean, you just couldn't believe that any of the infinite places that ball could deflect to, and it deflects perfectly right there. I mean, that's the soccer gods, right? That's the soccer gods. And, again, really tough moment for Jeff Gall. You said it, right? Not nearly the mistake the first one was, but yet another mistake. And just to not get even a shred of luck for that ball to go quite literally in 99.9% of other locations it could have gone. If you recreated that moment 1,000 times, the ball doesn't go anywhere near where it ended up. And that was just felt like the story of the day, unfortunately.
Yeah. However, the Fire almost did get another lifeline in this game, but this is going to bring us on to some of the non-soccer things that happened in this one, because in the 40th minute, the Fire have a corner. It is headed away or cleared away by Philly, partially. And, I don't know, about 35, 40 yards from goal, Philip Zinkernagel is waiting to head this ball back forward. He's just standing stationary at this point. Alowski's going out to close him down, and if on the video you see Alowski look up once and then twice again to find the ball so he knows where it is. He then totally forgets the soccer ball exists, and he launches himself and just puts his elbow and shoulder right into the sternum of Philip Zinkernagel, takes him out. We didn't get a good look at this in the stadium because we don't have the benefit of replay. Everybody at home online, or I got a couple texts about this saying that, that should absolutely be a red card. Going back and looking at today, sure looks like a targeting penalty from the NFL to me, given that launching aspect of it. He gets a yellow. I think the reason it probably doesn't get upgraded is because his shoulder does not make flush contact with Zinkernagel's face. But clearly the intent here was, okay, I looked at the ball, and now for the last few steps, I'm only looking at the guy, and I'm just going to light him up. And I think, do I think the Fire win this game if Alowski gets sent off here? No, but it was a potential inflection point that I think also you can say helped lead to how chippy and physical this game ended up getting, because if the referee already didn't have control of the game at this point, he had completely lost it here.
I mentioned at the outset, I mostly played football and baseball through high school, played a lot of soccer growing up, but I was a fullback at one point in my high school career, and my favorite play was an ISO, because that meant as a pretty good-sized fullback, I got to meet a linebacker in the hole. That's what that took me back to.
Right.
And That's
Milanoski running an Oklahoma drill in the middle of a soccer game.
And so that's what that took me back to, was kind of some of the technique we were taught when we commit an ISO block, and that was to lower your pad level, to square your shoulder, and use basically part of your forearm, part of your shoulder, and then clean them out in a specific direction. That was the term we used, clean them out. That's what I felt like I watched. And so I'm not here to interpret the rule book and exactly how that should have been called. I share some of the sentiments that you just did, and certainly fans shared, that what I saw wasn't a move anywhere in any soccer handbook that I've ever seen. And if there's soccer handbooks, I don't know, that might be a dated reference. But
to your point, though,
training manual.
Right, because if it's a situation where if he takes a third look for the ball and then goes jumping for it and just kind of cleans Zinkernagel out, he's going to probably get called for a foul, but it's going to be like, hey, I was trying to head the ball. It's the, when your
intent.
eyes are
I think the key word is intent. And I think if you watch...
was not about the soccer ball. The soccer ball was not involved. And, so I think, this gets us to the second thing that wasn't good besides the fire in this game. And this game, the referees felt like they didn't ever have good control of this game, and it's going to roll right into, I think, what marred the end of this, which was the repeated warnings, including a stoppage for the chant that kept coming through. And again, to fold these together, the first place we got to look is the implementation of things, because, this game was chippy in the second half. We had all these stoppages. By rights, there probably should have been 6 to 8 minutes of stoppage time. Would have been about the number I would have expected. First, we're told in the press box there's going to be no stoppage time because it's like, this is ugly. This game's over. Everybody get out of here. Stoppage time then starts, and we hear over the PA, oh, no, it's going to actually be 2 minutes. And it's like, okay, whatever. This is still dumb, but okay, 2 minutes is an indication that the referee at least understands. Let's get out of here. We then proceed to play over 4 minutes of added time, where almost no soccer is played because the teams know this game is over. And we get to chant 3 or 4 more times on more goal kicks from Andre Blake. And it just felt like a game that in a whole lot of ways didn't change the outcome. But one of the places you got to look, and it's not fun to criticize the officiating, but this was less about specific calls and more just kind of felt like, part of the referee's job is in terms of controlling the game. It felt like they just kind of whiffed in a lot of facets.
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo the statement that the Fire put out, that as far as that chant goes, abhorrent. Want no part of that as a fan, as a broadcaster, as somebody that loves the game of soccer. There's no place for it, and so I'll let what the Fire said speak for itself, and I stand behind that. Yeah, I echo the game management aspect of it. I thought there could have been more to avoid what would have been more embarrassing situations, which ultimately is what happened. You've talked about it. It's been talked about, I think, ad nauseum about it. I am of the belief that it is incumbent upon a referee to, in fact, I've been a baseball umpire for 17 years. Your first thing is player safety, right? Before anything else, when you're an official, you're there for player safety. Beyond that, it's to be and they use these exact words in umpire school, stewards of the game. And I think that is where my frustration in those landing moments, fans are up to what is frankly unacceptable behavior that we both agree on. But I would have liked to have seen the game, to your point, end sooner. That didn't need to happen. There didn't need to be 3 or 4 more opportunities to create a situation no one wanted. And I still don't totally understand why there were 4 minutes of extra time. There was no stoppages really in those first 2 minutes. Not sure why the game got extended 2 minutes out. And I think the whole situation was regrettable on every front. And I hope that the league can at least learn from it. I hope the teams can learn from it as well. And we can avoid what is frankly a really embarrassing situation, and one that nobody wanted and made nobody feel good. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, and I think you brought up, hope the league can learn from it. Because my thought is, the league has these protocols. Unfortunately, MLS has just taken a page out of CONCACAF's book And for those who are unfamiliar, what CONCACAF does is at every Mexican international game that's played in the United States, where the chant ends up being prevalent in the late stages, what they do is they wait and they ignore it and they ignore it. And then somewhere around the 85th minute, they'll put out the first announcement. And then maybe by stoppage time, you get we're going to pause the match for 2 minutes. But still to this day, this has been going on for years. Behavior hasn't changed at all. They've never called a match off. They've never abandoned one of these matches and followed that actual protocol. So if you're Major League Soccer, you don't have to be, that soft on it if you don't want to be. It's your league. You set the rules. So either if you're going to have this policy, enforce the policy and, actually, have empower your referees to kind of lay down the law here. Or alternatively, what would also be better than this is you kind of do nothing during the game and then you meter out your punishments later, whatever you deem that appropriate to be to fans, to teams, whatever it is. But this kind of half-baked situation where it's pretty obvious that all that's going on is you're pretending to care about something that is serious. But your behavior in the way you implement this says, no, we're basically just doing this for appearances. So, yeah, the league's got to do better here. And again, I'm not here to tell anybody how to fan, but, this is again, we don't need this in American soccer culture and fire soccer culture. There's so much from Mexican soccer in particular that I'd love to see more of in American soccer culture in terms of the energy, the passion. I'd love to see fans care about the Fire and their MLS teams in the way fans care about Cruz Azul or Club America or Tigres or Monterrey or any of those teams. I would love that energy, and we should absolutely bring that. And I love the, what we get in this Fire supporter section with the horns and the chanting, not this chanting, but, the general, just the noise, the passion. That's all great. And it's great to take the soccer cultures of this city, because there's a lot of them, and weave them into something unique that is uniquely for the Fire and uniquely Chicago. But I'll leave it at, we don't need to bring everything from other soccer cultures with us into this one. We're able, it's kind of the beauty of it is this is unique. It's our own, and it's a reflection of all the different influences that fans are bringing to these games. And so hopefully this was at the last game of the season. Hopefully this can be in the rear view, and in the next season, can be a bit more positive and, kind of bring a better energy overall. It's also a good time to remind people that there's a new stadium coming in a couple years, and, there's not going to be unlimited space in that stadium. And we have been here before with the club and supporters groups kind of butting heads. And so the caution I would give is pick which hills you're willing to die on, because this, everybody wants the energy in 2028 to be the best it can be. And the best it can be includes all of that noise, all of that music, all of that. It does not include that chant, and I think that's just something to be mindful of as we go forward. There was no other soccer played in this game. The second half totally sucked. I think Philly fans would agree it was basically unwatchable crap, because Philly was like, hey, we're advancing and we got more games to play and we're not really interested in running anymore. And the Fire were like, yeah, this also stinks. We would also like to go home. So guess what? We're going to talk about some transfer news, because somehow one day into the offseason, we have maybe more than a rumor. We have some substantial reporting out of Sweden that say the Fire are signing AIK captain Anton Soletros. I'm sure that's wrong. We will be corrected if this goes through by the man himself in the coming months. Fee in excess of $3 million. I think it's being reported as 30 million kroner, which is something like $3.2 million for a transfer fee. We'll have a little graphic for the folks on YouTube, but he's a 29-year-old Stockholm native. He came up through the AIK Academy before he bounced around a bit in Russia, Norway, and France. But he's come back to AIK. Again, he captains the club. He has 19 caps for Sweden. He has played in Sweden's last 17 fixtures. So this is a guy, Max, who is peaking in his late 20s and who the Fire are looking to potentially to say, hey, we need some more midfield depth. Again, if you want to just talk roster, he's arguably just a Kouame replacement in terms of a body. But this is a really young group. I mean, if you think about, the amount of times we saw Jay Davila, Sergio Orejel, and Brian Gutierrez out there together, you got to get some age and experience in there, and it seems like, without knowing too much about him, that Soleros seems like a guy who brings a lot of stuff the Fire don't have right now.
Yeah, it's exciting. Not what I expected to wake up Monday morning. I mean, Greg Berhalter working fast for sure. If this is in fact confirmed later on, haven't seen anything from the club, and I'm sure there won't be for a while. But I've seen quotes from the club in Sweden, and it seems pretty real. Exciting. I think this goes to how I opened my appearance with you, Alex. I'm excited. Like, there's so much good things happening that, I hate that we had to spend even 1 minute on some of this negativity, which it had to happen. I mean, I understand that, but there's just so many good things happening. The improvement for the team, that the fact that Fire fans, after a disappointing ending Saturday, have the ability to wake up Monday morning and be excited about the future 48 hours later. I mean, come on, how long has it taken some of the moves in past Fire off seasons when fans are looking around like, what's going to happen? Meanwhile, you wake up 48 hours after the season and a very meaningful piece is already reportedly headed this way. So again, there's just so much to be excited about, and I'm excited to move forward, with this organization, hopefully back on the radio side next season. Contracts get renewed every year. You never quite know in this business, in the play-by-play business. You know that as well as I do, Alex, that changes can be made, but I'm hoping to be back because it continues to be exciting, and I'm sure this isn't it. Greg, I think, has been pretty clear. There's going to be substantial changes and improvements again this offseason. So exciting stuff.
Right. I mean, and maybe, this is probably not how these things work, but maybe Greg Berhalter was like, hey, we need to give people something here to latch onto. Let's
a little tinfoil hatty of you. I don't find that as a realistic scenario, but I hear what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, so the Swedish season has one more game to run in the Allsvenskan. So, their season's not done yet. Fire players haven't even cleaned out their lockers yet. Like, again, even if it's done, this is not a thing that's going to get reported out for a while. Our friends over at Men in Red 97, Alex and Tim, have been posting updates on this and the ongoing, any updates as well. Again, the reports first came from Sweden. Tom Bogert from The Athletic had an update about it today as well. So, yeah, this seems very real. And again, it's, it's not dissimilar to the Zinkernagel signing, but this is a guy who comes with a bit more recent, obvious, pedigree, and for about double the fee that Zinkernagel was reportedly signed for. I mean, again, you're bringing in a guy who's regularly getting central midfield minutes for the Swedish national team, which isn't nothing. And, there are always great little compilations on YouTube, and it appears that Soletros has quite a left foot on him. So maybe we've got some company for Mr. Zinkernagel in terms of dead ball set piece delivery next season. But yeah, hopefully, to your point, this is just the first of a whole lot of exciting news this offseason as the Fire look to push ahead into, again, what continues to be a crazy competitive Eastern Conference. So, Max, I kind of want to end this episode the way we started it, which is, the Fire, they return to the playoffs for the first time in years. They play these 3 games. They win one of them. If we're looking strictly for positives, what do you think, what do you hope the team is going to take forward from what for so many guys on this team was a completely new experience over these last couple of weeks?
Well, it was a step, and I hope that everybody looks at it that way, that as fun as it was to be back in the playoffs, you want to get to the point as an organization where, the proverbial, you're not just happy to be here, right, that you're there to win, and you're there to compete, and you're there to win tournaments and titles. And I think this year was a step. And if you continue forward that metaphor, there's probably a few more steps before you hit a landing. There will be a landing while you're climbing the stair, but eventually you keep climbing steps and you get to the top of the stairs. And so that is my goal, that I hope fans look at it that way, which is, this was a really fun step. I had so much fun broadcasting this year for this team on the radio. I want to be back because I want to be there for the next step. And there's great things coming. I mean, again, the stadium, another signing, great signings this year. Greg Berhalter clearly laying out a plan with what he wants to do with this club and seems to be here for a while. It's exciting. And I can't wait to see what else happens this offseason. And I can't wait to be hopefully in the booth in the end of February, early March. or
Right,
earlier.
and
I don't
again,
know. The season might start earlier, I think, because of the World Cup. We're still getting
yeah,
clarity on
it's looking more. Yeah, it's going to be like probably like a mid-February kind of start, and then heck, we might get an announcement this season that post World Cup they're going to flip the schedule around, and who knows what that means. That's a topic for another day entirely. But yeah, I mean, if you think about, there's so many exciting what ifs too to this season. What if Leo Barroso stays healthy? Nothing on Jonathan Dean, who I think greatly exceeded expectations and had a great season. But, if Barroso stays healthy, what did they have planned for him? What does that look like? If Zinkernagel is fully healthy for both Philly games, what again? The answer really long term is, well, hopefully you have more depth in the future so that losing one guy doesn't feel so harsh. But no, there is again, maybe there doesn't feel like there were many positives to take from Saturday specifically. But I think Greg Berhalter said, like, they're going to learn from this. This experience, this playoff experience, the plan is, hey, we're going to be back here next year. And when we're back here next year, back after 1 year rather than 8, we can look back and say, okay, what did we learn last year? What do we remember from that experience? And we can build on it. And I think that's the biggest thing. And we'll end on this note. You made the point about Greg Berhalter laying out a plan. For so many years, it just felt like this team was kind of in the wilderness. There's the biggest one. I forgot the big one. What if Andre Franco doesn't tear his ACL? Yeah, that is kind of big. Yeah. No, I mean, again, it's, yeah, if you go into that, if there's some crazy world where you're running that 3-4-3 with Barroso at right wing back, Franco in the midfield, and a fully healthy Zinkernagel, yeah, that's a better soccer team. It just is. And so, like, again, we don't know what Franco's injury plan is going to be yet. That was a loan with an option to buy. So now we're going to have this game of chicken this offseason where the Fire are like, we don't really want to be paying for a guy while he's hurt and yada, yada. So, again, it's for another day. But, yeah, the Fire, there's a direction. It feels like, you can believe that there's going to be progress forward. We're going to have a recap episode on the season in greater detail next week, and so we'll get into all the nitty-gritty of this. But I agree with you, Max. It feels like, again, this team is pointed upward, and it's not always going to be a constant climb, but it feels like, again, they are climbing towards better in the future, and it'll be exciting to see what that better looks like. I think that's going to just about do it for today, and I feel better at the end of the show than I did at the start of it, which on a day like today, I think is the goal. Max Anderson, thanks for helping me and us get there.
Of course, Alex, thanks for having me, and it was a blast. Happy to come back anytime you need me.
Absolutely, and we'll hope to hear you back on the airwaves next season. Off-season, to your point, is going to feel shorter than it usually does. Again, we're going to be back next week. Plan right now is same time, same place, 4 o'clock on Monday. And we're going to do a season recap and kind of go through the entire year, maybe give out some awards. Again, look big picture and put this specific game and these playoffs kind of to the side for now as we reflect on Greg Berhalter's first year in charge of the Fire. Also, keep an eye out for news on a final season recap episode of CHGO Stars. They got a win in their final game of the season, a late goal from Jamise Joseph, securing 3 points on the final day of the season as they ride off into a new and somewhat uncertain future. And so there's lots to talk about there as well. Thanks to Sean today, as always, behind the scenes for making the ship go. Thanks for Max Anderson for joining me today, especially as he's traveling. I'm ALLCITY, and I'll see you next time on CHGO Fire. Nah, it's all right.